poetry lovers, welcome to my channel Bella Poetry. My name is Bella and I love beautiful poetry. In our fourth segment of the second series, The Best Love Poetry and the Authors That Penned It, we will talk about a famous English Victorian romantic poet, Lord Byron. Lord Byron was born George Gordon Noel on January 22nd, 1788 in London. He inherited the title Baron Byron from his great-uncle. He was 10 years old when he inherited this title. His mother was Catherine Gordon of Guyte, an impoverished Scots heiress, and his father was Captain John Byron, who also had a nickname named Mad Jack. John Byron, Lord Byron's father, was considered a fortune-hunting person. He went after rich women. He was a widower. He had a daughter, Augusta, who was 5 years older than Lord Byron. When Lord Byron was born, his father was not present at his birth. He was constantly running away from creditors. Eventually, he escaped to France and died there in 1791 at the age of 36. Lord Byron was only 3 years old at that time, so he never had a father figure in his life. His mother, Catherine Gordon, had a lot of issues of her own. She was schizophrenic, she was very unstable, and she was a very unhealthy presence in her son's life. One day she would be extremely affectionate towards him. The following day he would throw tantrums and scream at him. So it was not the best environment for a little boy. On top of everything, Lord Byron had a very abusive nurse. So all these ingredients kind of contributed to Lord Byron growing up as a person, as an adult, who always sought love, affection, and acceptance. Lord Byron also suffered. He had a club foot that didn't allow him to walk properly, although he was extremely handsome and very talented. You will consider him a genius. He was a very, very smart man, but he had a lot of issues with his anger, with spending a lot of money, with falling in love too quickly, and having numerous affairs with both men and women. Lord Byron attended the Harrow School in the beginning, and in the school in 1803, he fell in love for the first time with his cousin, Mary Chaworth. But Mary Chaworth was just a girl, so she didn't return his affections, and that kind of broke. This was the first heartbreak for Lord Byron. Then in 1808, he completed the Harrow School, and in 1805, and in 1805 through 1808, he attended, until he turned 20 years old, he attended the Trinity College of Cambridge. And in Trinity College, he learned everything about love, politics, and how to spend a lot of money without a reason. He fell in love there as well, but this time the object of his affection was a man, a choir boy who was 2 years younger than Lord Byron. His name was John Addleston. And I can say that I think that he was not just infatuated with John, but in love with him. So when Lord Byron finished school, and when he turned 21 years old, he decided to try politics. So he took up his seat at the House of Lords, and during his political short career, he spoke 3 times in the House of Lords, and always he took during these times the unpopular stance, unpopular sides, because he was very confrontational and rebellious. But again, he confined himself and he decided to leave England and start traveling through Europe. So from 1809 to 1811, for 2 years, he and his friend John Hobhouse traveled throughout Europe. They also visited Greece, and Lord Byron really fell in love with the country and its people. But again, he was restless, so he decided to go back to England, and in 1811 he returned to England, but unfortunately this year his mother passed away on August 2nd. Although she was not the best influence on her son due to her mental illness, she truly loved him and she was proud of his accomplishment, and she also took care of the Newstead Abbey estate in his absence. So he loved her as well and was grateful to her for her help and support. When she passed away, he said, "I had but one friend." This actually says a lot about him. "I had but one friend in the world, and she is gone." So the death of his mother was a big heartbreak for Lord Byron. And not enough, the death of his mother, a few months later in October 1811, his first, I would say, serious love, John Addleston, the choir boy in Trinity College that he was in love with, passed away from consumption. And Lord Byron was deeply affected by his death. He dedicated a poem called "To Thyrsa" to him. He kind of addressed the poem to a woman to masquerade the fact that it was actually addressed to John. While he was on tour, he started working on a poem called Child's Herald's Pilgrimage. This poem made him very, very famous. After it was published, it received a great acclaim, and Lord Byron became extremely popular in high society of London. He attended a lot of parties. Women were always surrounding him, and he became very popular. His future wife, Annabel Wilbank, called it Byromania because women were constantly around him. So that kind of led to him having affairs with many ladies in high society, most of them married. In 1812, he had a scandalous affair with Lady Caroline Lamb, who was married as well. The affair lasted just a few months. They met at a party. She actually read the poem Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, and she was a poetess herself and a writer, and she fell in love with Lord Byron. And she wrote to him, and they met, and it was a very passionate affair that lasted only a few months, but it brought a terrible scandal. Her husband, her family suffered from the notoriety that the scandal brought to them, but Lady Caroline Lamb didn't care. She was in love. But a few months later, Lord Byron broke off the relationship because he wanted to marry a rich woman. He was constantly in debt. And he was, I would say, very callous, very ruthless with her. And Lady Caroline Lamb actually loved Lord Byron for the rest of her life. So he moved on. It's interesting to say that at that time he also had affairs with other ladies, Lady Oxford, Lady Frances Webster, and people were gossiping that he actually had an affair with his half-sister, Augusta Leigh. And not surprisingly, in 1814, Augusta Leigh gives birth to a little girl. Everybody, she tells everybody it's her father's surname of Leigh that she gave to the girl, but people say that it was actually this little girl was the daughter of Lord Byron. So there was a lot of scandal around Lord Byron. He decides to kind of reinstate his reputation, and he wants to get married. So he marries a woman by the name of Annabel Milbank, and in 1814, Lady and Lord Byron move into the Duchess of Devonshire, London house at 13 Piccadilly Terrace. But unfortunately, through 1815, he drinks heavily, he spends money, he goes to the parties, he treats Annabel in a very bad way, very cruel way. He flies into rage. He makes her scapegoat for all his financial troubles, and Annabel suffers a lot, but not too long. In 1816, she takes her daughter, she gives birth to a little girl as well, and in 1816, she takes their daughter, Augusta Ada, and leaves the house where they lived together and disappears. And she never saw Lord Byron again. In March, a couple of months later, they signed the separation agreement, and that's the end of this relationship. So in 1816, Lord Byron finds himself in financial trouble. His marriage breaks down. He cannot see his child. He's surrounded by many scandals, and he decides to leave England for good. So he goes to Europe, and in the beginning, he stays in Lake Geneva. And it's interesting because at that time, Percy Shelley, another British very popular poet, and Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein, visit him. They bring with them Mary Shelley's half-sister, Claremont. Lord Byron had an affair with Claremont while still in England. So when they come to Lake Geneva, their affair they resume their affair. And again, not surprisingly, in 1817, Claremont returns to London and gives birth to their daughter, whom she names Allegra. So after that, Byron travels on to Italy. In Venice, he had more affairs, and mostly with married women that also bring about scandals, societal scandals. The good thing happened at that time that in 1818 he sold Newstead Abbey for £94,500, and this amount covered up all his debts and gave him money to live on. But his life was debauchery, his drinking, his numerous affairs kind of aged him beyond his years, and he also started having different health issues. However, that didn't prevent him of having another affair in 1819 with the married Countess Teresa. Her name was Teresa Guiccioli, and she was only 19 years old, and she had a husband who was 3 times her age. So they started the affair shamelessly. They moved in together in 1820, but these years were actually very productive for Lord Byron. He wrote during this time his famous works Beppo, the Prophecy of Dante, and the satiric poem Don Juan, which he never finished. So they traveled together for 4 years. They're having this exciting time. But again, he feels the restlessness. So he decides to go to Greece. But I have to say that before he went to Greece, which was in 1823, in 1822, his daughter Allegra by Claremont passes away. Claremont brought the daughter to him to Italy, so he'll take care of her. And he sent the daughter to convent, and the poor girl passed away at the age of 5. Lord Byron obviously blamed himself, and it was another heartbreak for him. In 1823, He goes to Greece. If you remember, in 1811 he traveled to Greece, and he loved the country and loved the people. And at that time, Greece was engaged in a Greek war for independence from Turks, and he decides to join the battle. He wore this red uniform, and he donated 4,000 pounds to activate the Greek fleet to fight the Turks. And Greek people loved and revered him and called him the Messiah and cheered him and saluted to him when he passed by. But unfortunately, after one battle, it was a rainy day, and he became, on April 9th, he became very sick. He was out riding, he became very sick, so he kind of stayed in bed, and then his condition worsened. And finally, on April 19th, 1824, during an electrical storm, Lord Byron passed away. His death was mourned throughout Greece because he was considered a national hero, and in England as well. His body was brought back to England. They wanted to bury him first in Westminster Abbey, but then refused because of his questionable morality. And so at the end, Lord Byron was buried at his ancestral home at Newstead Abbey. So he was only 36 years old, and so it's kind of a very sad ending to a man who was troubled man. He had a lot of scandals following him, but at the same time, he was a poetic genius, and he left a legacy of beautiful poetry. So today I will read a quote by Lord Byron that actually kind of very well relates to his life. He said, "Despair and genius are too often connected." And it was definitely true for his life. And I will read a very famous poem by Lord Byron called "She Walks in Beauty Like the Night." He dedicated this poem to his cousin who was in mourning. She came to a party and she wore this beautiful black dress with sequins. Her name was Mrs. Wilmot. So here is the poem. She walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes, thus mellow to the tender light which heaven to gaudy day denies. One shade the more, one ray the less, had half impaired the nameless grace which waves in every raven tress, or softly lightens over her face, where thoughts serenely sweet express how pure, how dear their dwelling place, and on that cheek and over that brow, so soft, so calm, yet eloquent, the smiles that win, the tints that glow, but tell of days in goodness spent, a mind at peace with all below, a heart whose love is innocent. Beautiful poem. And with this poem, we end this segment. Thank you for visiting Bella Poetry Presents, and I hope you'll visit us again. And if you like this segment, please like and subscribe. Your support is greatly appreciated. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye.